Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm really excited to be here today because I've decided to run a series of broadcasts based on a book by my mentor. And first of all, before we get too far in it, my name is Jörg Hartmann. I'm a Proctor Gallagher Institute consultant. And in that capacity, I study a lot of Bob Proctor's work, of course, because I'm also a mentor for Thinking into Results and other programs that he and the Institute have developed. And so, in this context, I really want to share with you something that's given me great pleasure, great inspiration when it came out into my life. Of course, this book has been around since 1984, and we're going to be talking about it today. Well, in 1984, I was barely out of high school. And if I had had this book in 1984, there is just no way of predicting how my life would have turned out today, many years later. So, with that said, this book is You Were Born Rich by Bob Proctor. I believe it was a bestseller at the time that it was written. And so we, uh, we have the great pleasure of really delving into Bob's work here. He's been studying human potential, success, and why people have success for 50 plus years. Now, at the time that he wrote the book, it might have been a little bit less than 50 years. But in any case, there is a wealth of information here. And it dates all the way back to Andrew Carnegie, who was the mentor of Napoleon Hill, who was then commissioned to write The Rules of Success, which then turned into an absolute smash hit and helped many, many people become very, very wealthy. Then condensed down into another book called Think and Grow Rich. And that was basically the basis for Bob's immense success. And that was what Earl Nightingale and another one of Bob's mentors used in order to develop his self-development programs. That said, long introduction, but it's worth it. So the book, written in 1984, has 10 chapters. I'm going to be reading periodically from these chapters. And I really welcome your comments and whatever ideas you have questions, just pop them into the chat, into the comments. And I'm very excited to address them when I can. I'll wait for a natural break in the flow. So the more you guys put into this when you're listening to this, the more we'll all get out of this. So it's a two-way street. And I'm going to start right now with an introductory poem in the book, which really is powerful and touched me in some ways. And it starts like this. It says, only one and only you. Every single blade of grass and every flake of snow is just a wee bit different. There's no two alike, you know. From something small like grains of salt to each gigantic star, all were made with this in mind, to be just what they are. How foolish then to imitate, how useless to pretend, since each of us comes from a mind whose ideas never end. There'll only be one of me to show what I can do. And you should likewise feel very proud. There's only one of you. That is where it all starts, with you, a wonderful, unlimited human being. Now, this poem was not written by Bob. It was written by a chap called James T. Moore. And I love it because it just reminds us how unique we are as individuals and how much potential is lying within in our mind, and how our mind is so unique, and how there is just so much more to be explored. And I'm just scrolling here to pass all those other introductions to actually get into the reading of chapter 1. Now we know we have unlimited potential. We're incredibly unique. We're incredibly powerful. And Bob is going to lead us through other concepts here in this book, where he shows us just how powerful we are, how energy flows, and how everything just condenses down to spirit, and how we have total control over it if we decide to take control. It's really a powerful concept. So it starts off with a chapter I think that's close to all of our hearts. It's called Me and Money. And it goes like this. The Edgeware Beach Hotel. In 1923, at the Edgeware Beach Hotel in Chicago, 8 of the world's wealthiest financiers met. These 8 men controlled more money than the United States government at that time. They included the president of the largest independent steel company. They included the president of the largest gas company, the greatest wheat speculator, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, a member of the president's cabinet, as well as the great bear on Wall Street, the head of the world's greatest monopoly, and the president of the Bank of International Settlement. Certainly, one would have to admit that a group of such powerful and successful men was gathered in that place, at least men who had found the secret of earning money, right? So we're going to learn about that, how interesting that develops. Now let's see where these men were 25 years later. Well, the president of the largest independent steel company, Charles Schwab, lived on borrowed money for 5 years before he died bankrupt. The president of North America's largest gas company, Howard Hobson, went insane. The greatest wheat speculator, Arthur Cutten, died abroad insolvent. The president of the New York Stock Exchange, Richard Whitney, was sent to Sing Sing Penitentiary. A member of the president's cabinet, Albert Fall, was pardoned from prison so he could die at home. The greatest bear on Wall Street, Jesse Livermore, died a suicide. The head of the greatest monopoly, Ivar Kruger, killed himself. The president of the Bank of International Settlement, Leon Fraser, also died a suicide. So we can see they did not have very happy outcomes in the end. Each of these men learned well the art of earning money, but it would seem that not one of them had ever learned how to live a rich life, which was incidentally their birthright. It is stories like this one that have caused many well-meaning but ignorant people to say, well, I told you, it's no good to have a lot of money, it is bad. Or, it just goes to show you that rich people really aren't happy. But of course, that is not true. For although these 8 men would appear to have slid off the track, there are many wealthy people who are very happy and who do a tremendous amount of good with their money, live healthy, well-balanced, and lovely lives. Okay? Now consider this. Money will have a greater influence on your life than almost any other commodity you can think of. Indeed, the sudden loss of or acquisition of money will affect your attitude to a tremendous extent. Therefore, you must agree that everyone should have a deep understanding of exactly what money is and of the laws governing its attraction. Yet, the sad fact is that not one person in 10 does. 95% of 100 settle for whatever they get, wishing they had more all the way from the cradle to the casket, never understanding that they could actually have had it all if they had wanted. Isn't that interesting? So he goes on to say, let me digress for a moment. As you journey through this book, you might have a tendency to let your mind wander off, either thinking about someone you know who has earned a great deal of money, or possibly about someone who has gone into bankruptcy. But I want to suggest that you attempt to keep focusing only on yourself, because what somebody else has or does not have is not going to affect you. And it is your financial situation that you want to improve, okay? Reminding us, these are just anecdotes of other people. And the most important part here is to remember, we have to look at our own self. So money is important. One of the most prevalent misconceptions concerning money relates to its importance. For example, how many times have you heard people say in conversation, money isn't everything, or money isn't important, or I don't care about money? Well, the people who say these things might not care about money, but I'll bet their car dealer cares about it. Their grocer does. And so does the person who holds their mortgages. In truth, there can be no denial of the fact that money is important to any person living in a civilized society. Therefore, to argue that it is not as important as it is absurd. For nothing can take the place of money in the arena in which it is used. Wow, powerful point, right? Money makes the world go round, and there is no way of denying it. So we can try to negate it, we can try to feel guilty about it, we can try to make others feel guilty about having wealth, or we can be secretly jealous. Either way, it doesn't change the fact that if you have money, you have the power to do things, to do good in the world. I'll carry on quoting Bob, and he gets into this very important topic here. And he says, money is a servant. Now that I have affirmed the importance of money, let me backtrack to add this one word of caution. Always remember, money is a servant. You are the master. Be very careful not to reverse that equation, because many people of high intelligence have already done so, to their great detriment. Unfortunately, many of those poor souls loved money and used money, which violated one of the most basic laws governing true financial success. You should always love people and use money, rather than the reverse. Another myth many people like to accept about money is that it only comes as a result of luck or good fortune. For instance, whenever people gather to talk about someone they know who has been financially successful, there is always somebody amongst them who will say, "Oh, Harry was just lucky. Oh, Harry was just in the right place at the right time." But I want to assure you in no uncertain terms that although luck obviously plays some part in financial success, it is never sufficient in and of itself. Money is an effect, and it must always be earned. Believe me, there are no free rides in this life, and the only people who are making money the easy way either work in the mint or are on their way to jail if they have not already arrived there. Therefore, always bear in mind that while good fortune is a factor in financial success, it must always be coupled with effort and hard work. I love this portion here because he reminds us that money is also subject to the laws of the universe, like everything. And it starts right here with money. Money is subject to the law of cause and effect. Money is an effect. You and your deeds are the cause. You must never forget that, because there is no such thing as money for nothing, as we are going to learn that further down the road here. Next chapter is money must circulate. A third thing that you should know about money is that it is valuable only as long as it is being used. Once it's been taken out of circulation, it becomes as worthless as old newspapers or empty beer cans that have been stashed away in the attic. To understand the truth of this principle, consider the following story. On a bookshelf in my home, I have a silver beer stain that was given to me as a gift for a speech that I made. Now, whenever I go into my house, I take all the change from my pocket and I put it into the cup. Then, when the cup is almost filled, I give it to one of my children or one of two young cousins. Each one of them takes turn receiving the cup, and of course, they eagerly anticipate their turn, right? The point I want to notice, however, is that while the cup is being filled, the money is totally and absolutely useless, has no value whatsoever. It just sits there serving no useful function and not even drawing any interest. However, as soon as the cup is filled and the money is turned over to one of the kids, it literally flies into action. For instance, just last week, TJ, one of my young cousins, received the money. He immediately took it from my hand, rushed off to a golf school, and purchased several golf lessons with his inheritance. Now, I can't honestly say what the golf pro did with the money once he got it, but I do feel fairly safe in saying that he didn't just return it to a cup on his bookshelf. No, there really isn't any dispute about it. Money is not meant to be taken out of circulation. Rather, it is meant to be used, enjoyed, and circulated. Isn't that a powerful point? Money needs to be circulated. If you stash it, you're just killing it. It becomes totally pointless. Money is only valuable when it's being used. Keeping it, hoarding it, guarding it doesn't do anything to money, and it might not help you to attract more. That's the funny thing. Spending money in a wise way may, in fact, be the reason why it multiplies and comes back in bigger quantities. So I carry on reading here. This brings me to an even more dramatic illustration of the same principle, namely the story of old Mr. Chapman. Mr. Chapman was an elderly gentleman who lived a few doors down the street from our family when I was just a boy. Although there were tremendous age differences between us, Mr. Chapman and I became fast friends, and I often watched him pushing his small junk cart up and down the block. You see, Mr. Chapman worked as a junk dealer, and he made his living by picking up the things other people had thrown away. All the years went by, however, Mr. Chapman became more and more stooped from his arduous labors, and one day, shortly after World War II, he passed away. Since he lived alone and apparently had no close relatives living nearby, the police entered his house to take stock of his possessions. Not surprisingly, they found the house littered with many old furnishings and assorted memorabilia from Mr. Chapman's past. However, much to their amazement, the police also discovered over $100,000 in old bills packed in boxes throughout the house. Now, quick to pick up on such an unusual occurrence, the Toronto Daily Star carried a front page story the next day about Mr. Chapman, in which it asked the obvious question: why would an individual worth well over 100,000 choose to keep money stashed away in old boxes strewn haphazardly throughout the house? Although I was still quite young at the time, I asked myself a similar question, namely, why would a person like Mr. Chapman choose to live like a veritable pauper when he had so much money at his disposal? He could have used his money for his own enjoyment. He could have invested it to earn a return for himself, or to help create jobs for other people. Or he could have just deposited it in the bank and earned interest on his money. But instead, he chose to put it in a jar on the shelf. And he thereby rendered it absolutely useless. No, my friends, there is absolutely no doubt about it. Money is not meant to be hoarded. Rather, it is meant to be used, enjoyed, and circulated. So please, whatever you choose to do with your money, don't make the same mistake that poor old Mr. Chapman did. Now, please note that when I suggest that money should be kept in circulation, I do not mean it should be squandered. Now, there's a world of difference between those two concepts. And if you haven't found out what the difference yet is, I would suggest you find out as soon as possible. Next here is a prosperity consciousness exercise, which you're going to find quite interesting, I think, because it leads us to think about ourselves a little bit. This is where it gets interesting. Now that we have touched upon some of the characteristics of money, let us briefly turn to a simple technique, which you can begin using immediately and start attracting the amount of money you desire. So the first thing that I want you to do is to picture yourself in your mind's eye sitting in a room with several of your friends. Then I want you to visualize yourself announcing to them your intention of becoming wealthy, at least wealthy enough to live the way you choose to live. Now imagine how that would make you feel. If you're like most people, you would probably feel very uncomfortable. Perhaps you would feel so uncomfortable that you might even retract what you had just said by informing your friends that you were only joking. You should understand, however, that people who are wealthy never feel uncomfortable when the subject of money is brought up. Why don't they, you ask? The most obvious answer would be because they already have lots of it. But that is not the correct answer. You should realize that people don't feel comfortable about money they have because they have it. They have it because they feel comfortable about it. In other words, one of the reasons that wealthy people have money is that they have developed that state of consciousness we will hereafter refer to as prosperity consciousness. Therefore, it follows if we wish to attract money to ourselves, we must begin to foster a prosperity consciousness as well. Oh, I love this. All right, I'll finish reading this and then we'll comment on that. The question you should now be asking yourself is this: How do I go about developing this prosperity consciousness for myself? Let me explain. The best way to develop a prosperity consciousness is to start seeing yourself in your mind's eye already in possession of the amount of money that you desire. The reason this is so is that since the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between the actual possession of money and mere visualization, you will soon become very comfortable with the idea of money. As a result, you will start attracting it to yourself. This may sound like a game you're playing, but let me assure you, it is one of the wisest things that you can possibly do. For when you succeed in conceiving your subconscious mind that you are wealthy and that it feels good to be wealthy, your subconscious mind will automatically seek ways of making your imaginary feelings of wealth manifest themselves in material form. Now, if these last few lines seem like sheer fantasy to you, just ignore them for the time being and continue reading. We will be dealing with prosperity consciousness at different points in the book. And I guarantee you that before you finish this book, those lines will start to make a lot of sense to you. Now, I can't help but comment here quickly. He tells us that the reason why people attract money is because they feel comfortable about it. It's not that they're getting comfortable when the money has arrived. The money arrives because they're comfortable with money. To me, if you're looking for money, this is probably one of the most powerful statements you'll ever find. Because if your mind isn't set to receive money, you can work day and night and nothing will happen. Isn't that interesting? I love that. So we go on, and he says in another chapter here, a short subheading, says, "Fear not, now that I have touched upon a technique which will help you acquire greater wealth. Let me offer this further word of warning. If you want to have money, one thing you should never do is worry about whether or not you will get the money you desire or whether you will keep it." Now, let me elaborate. He goes on to say, in the Bible, Job, the great sufferer of biblical times, makes the following remark: "Behold, the thing I fear has come to visit upon me. Now, stop and ask yourself, if you will, what those biblical words mean to those of us concerned about money today." Well, one thing they certainly mean is that if we insist about constantly worrying about not having enough money, or if we habitually worry about losing the money we do have, then we're absolutely guaranteed not to worry in vain. For just as surely as Job was afflicted by his many maladies, so too shall we be afflicted by the lack or the loss of money. So, the more we worry about it, the more those worries will, in fact, materialize themselves. In other words, the main thing about money is to feel relaxed about it, to keep it circulating, to feel comfortable with the idea of having money and not to feel a single inkling of guilt or resentment towards those who have it, or jealousy, or any other ill feeling that we may come up. And if you really examine yourself, when you ask yourself, how do you feel about money? You will get some feelings pop up. And I suggest you take a pen and a piece of paper and write down those feelings. Because if you do, it'll help you to become aware of them. Because those are those feelings that are based on your belief system that has been implanted in your subconscious mind since you were born. And that you most likely can't do much about until now. You couldn't help what happened. You just absorbed all these things because you didn't know better. And the more often somebody told you that money is the root of all evil, the more you will eventually just internalize that. But you need to get these internal beliefs out of you. Become aware of them. Write them down. Take a pen and a piece of paper. Write them down. Get them out of your system so that you can then develop the consciousness about your real beliefs so that you can start doing something about it. This is really what we want to be doing. We want to do something about it. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to continue here with Bob. To take a more contemporary example, let us again consider the tragic case of poor old Mr. Chapman. As you will recall, he was the elderly gentleman who never spent any of his hard-earned savings. But the question is, why didn't he? Most likely it was because he was afraid that if he spent his money, he would become poor and hence would be forced to live like a pauper. The irony was, however, that because of his fear, he did live like a pauper anyway. Or to be more biblical about it, the thing that he feared most came to visit upon him. In the last chapter, you'll be given a fuller explanation of the paradox of why we attract into our lives the very things we least desire. But for now, suffice it to say, worrying about money is always extremely counterproductive. This principle holds true even if you rationalize your worry with the old platitudes that you're just saving a little for a rainy day. Now, I must put forward one other caveat at this time. If you really want to significantly increase the amount of money you are presently earning, the first thing you must do is learn to pay substantially less attention to what others around you are saying and substantially more attention to what that quiet little voice that speaks within you is saying. Put more prosaically, you must strive to become much less susceptible to influences outside of yourself and much more inclined to trust the instincts and feelings that lie within you. Now, let me elaborate. Most people who fail to accumulate enough money to live in the style they choose are the same people who are most easily influenced by other people's opinions. For instance, they are often the people who let the writers of economics doom and gloom, whether in the newspapers or on news broadcasts, do their thinking for them. But as Napoleon Hill pointed out in his great book, Think and Grow Rich, opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. In fact, almost everyone has a flock of them ready to be foisted upon anyone who is willing to accept them. Therefore, if you know you've been unduly influenced in the past by other people's opinions, make up your mind right now, before you read any further, that from here on in, you're going to heed your own counsel, while keeping an attentive ear open for God's counsel. Remember, if you do, there's absolutely no reason why you cannot become financially successful within a very reasonable period of time. I love this. You see, Bob's reminding us all the time that opinions are cheap. Everybody's got them. And guess what? Most of them are just hot air. We fill our minds up with opinions about all these news flashes that are busy trying to compete with each other to get the attention of the public. Yet most of them are just nothing but water under the bridge. Just comes and goes. Nothing substantially changes from it. However, if you listen to your own inner little voice, that little guidance within you, and very often we're so full of stuff in our minds that we don't hear it. It takes some time to relieve yourself of all this noise and to start making some room so that you can hear with your inner ear that little voice that talks to you and says, this is a good idea, that isn't. Do this, don't do that. It takes a little bit of skill. But first, it starts with a conscious decision that you're no longer going to entertain all those people that are just throwing out useless information that doesn't change anything in your life. Why wouldn't you spend more time thinking about what can work in your life, what will help you in your life, and what is important, and put that into action rather than listening to other people's opinions who are just reciting again other people's opinions and everyone's following the follower. So with respect to money, and this chapter is all about money, it's called Me and Money. We can summarize a few really powerful points. First, Money is an effect of you who is the cause. Cause and effect. Emerson called this the law of all laws. It is one of the most powerful universal laws. And if we live by law, then we're living by truth. And truth is something that most people don't recognize anymore because we are spending so much time listening to all sorts of opinions and other people who have no clue what they're talking about as well. So what else did we learn in this chapter? We also learned that money needs to be kept in circulation. So money that stays where it is doesn't do anything. Absolutely nothing comes from money that sits and somewhere in a bank account, in your pillow, under your bed, in a jar, as Bob was mentioning in his story, or in any other place. If money doesn't get circulated, it doesn't have a chance to do good. So the purpose for money is really to exchange one service for another. So why not keep money in circulation? If you do it wisely, it comes back in greater quantities than you send it out. And that is the whole purpose. Why we're concerned or interested in money is so that we can do more good and we can have a better life and have a higher quality of life and impact other people more positively. Well, we also learned something else. It is our attitude towards money that will determine whether money comes to us or leaves us. And if your attitude to money is somehow conflictuous, you know what? It's not going to stay. It's going to go in greater quantities than it comes back in. You need to make sure that you clear out all your negative money beliefs and really get them out of your system. I suggest a writing technique. It really, really works well. Write down everything that comes to mind with respect to your beliefs in money, as I mentioned earlier. And as you get them out of your system, you can start becoming aware. And you know what? You have the power. Now that you're hopefully an adult who can rationalize things, you can ask yourself, is this belief still valid? Where did that come from? Does it help me in any way? No, yes. And then you can move on from there and start switching your beliefs. It is your money consciousness that makes money come or go. So I've been very excited about reading this for you. Chapter 1 continues, and I will continue on another day. For today, I'm going to take a break. It's been more than half an hour, and I'll come back again later in the week, and I will continue this chapter 1 called Me and Money from Bob Proctor's book, You Were Born Rich. And I'll continue commenting on it as I'm trying to bring more value and more understanding to you, so that you can benefit in a great way from this. Of course, you're always welcome to post comments, ask questions about anything that you don't agree with or that you would like me to enhance or elaborate further on. Please do, so that we can make this a livelier conversation, okay? This is just the beginning. There are 10 chapters in the book, and it will take some time to get through the entire book. So we'll have more occasions to meet again. I intend to come up here live at least twice a week so that we can, have a sort of a sense of flow and continuation. All right, folks, I've really enjoyed this little reading. I hope you got something out of this. Question your money beliefs and really write them out so that you have a chance to change them and start attracting more money into your lives. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.